All right. The focus of the book of Exodus and Genesis is the subject of who is Israel. Was sure to come up. It always will. When you start with Genesis and Exodus, the issue of who is Israel comes up. It's a question that no matter where you're at, people are going to say, wait a minute. Who is Israel? Is Israel in the Middle East?
That's where everybody takes it.
That's what everybody says. Okay. When Jacob blessed Joseph and his children, he reveals in Genesis 48, 16 and 15, and then a very interesting truth. And what was that truth? The name that he had blessed, see, that's what I get for going fast. I forget the age in the world. I was on the phone, I'm sorry. He had blessed the children when he had also been the blessing he had blessed the children with had also been upon his fathers. Now, let's look at the text and get a clear picture. Go to Genesis 48, 15 and 16. And let's read it for ourselves. And he blessed Joseph and said, God, and notice what he says, before whom my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, did walk, the God which fed me all my life long unto this day. Here's an interesting verse. Who is Jacob's father? Why is it said my fathers? Abraham is also his grandfather, but is also a father through his ancestral lines. Now, how many of us can remember our grandfather? How many of us can remember our great-grandfather? How many of us can remember our great-great-grandfather? How many can remember our great-great-great-grandfather? I do. I was 2 years old when my great-great-great-grandfather passed away. I had seen pictures, I had seen everything about him, I was told about him. Now, figure out when he was born. If I was born in 1952, my great-great-great-grandmother died at the age of 123 years old. Why such a long life? Anyway, here's the key for these texts. So Isaac says, blesses Joseph and says, God, before whom my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, did walk, the God which fed me all my life long until this day. And then he says, the angel which redeemed me from all evil. And then he says, bless these lads. So, what blessing is Jacob invoking here? Is he invoking the blessing of the angel or the God who has sent the angel to redeem? See? If you misread the text and you see the angel which redeemed me from all evil, it's the angel who redeems. Yes, he did. Who sent him? In whose action did the angel come? God. See? It says, and it's that blessing that comes. It says, let my name be named on them. What does that mean? Let my name be named on them. And the name of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow in a multitude in the midst of the earth. When it says, let my name be named on them, it doesn't mean that they will not have their own name. Abraham's name will change. He still has his own name. But there is a name applied to him also. Got it? There's a name applied. Isaac had his own name, but there's a name applied to him also. Why is that important? What was the name of our Lord? He was given a name before birth. But there are names applied to him, yes or no? See? And this is how it works. Now, it says here, let my name be named on them, and the name of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac. Well, if the name has been applied to them, that name was also applied to whom? Abraham and Isaac. See? Is that clear for you there? Marvin? Clear? All right. So, if it's clear that we are learning that the name that was given to Jacob was applied to him. His name Jacob didn't go away. We see it used many times after that. But there's a name given to him, and that name was Israel. Where do you get that name? In the book of Genesis chapter 32. Let's go back. Okay? Genesis 32. Go back for a second. In Genesis 32, you'll see the name applied to him. And this is important. In Genesis 32, we read from verse 22. It says, and he rose up that night and took his 2 wives and his 2 women servants and his 11 sons and passed over the ford Jabbok. And he took them and sent them over the brook and sent over that he had. And Jacob was left alone there. Was left alone. And there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. Now, everybody says, breaking of the day is when? Morning. Okay. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint, as he wrestled with him. Key verse. As he wrestled with him. And he said, let me go, for the day breaks. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. With whom was Jacob wrestling? He had to have known who it was, or thought who it was, otherwise he wouldn't ask a blessing of a man. Okay? And he said unto him, what is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. And this is why he gives him this name. Why? Here's the key for the entire purpose for the name of Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. For as a prince, thou hast power with God and men, and hast prevailed. Now, if a prince then, prince of whom? Who is his king? In order to be a prince, you have to have a king, yes or no? Or a kingdom. Or a house with someone ruling. Whose prince is Jacob? What does he say? For as a prince thou hast power with God and with men. Now, it has to be a prince of whom? Of the house of whom? Got it? Kingdom of whom? And if it's already established, when was it established? Because now they're giving him this title and this name. In the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 30, easy for me to say, 32, we read, go to Deuteronomy chapter 32. When was that kingdom established? When was it prepared? Book of Deuteronomy chapter 2. Let's read this. Verse 8. Notice what it says. When the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance. When did he do that? Read the next verse. When he separated the sons of Adam. He set the bounds of the people according to the number of whom? When did God separate the sons of Adam?
Abel and Cain episode.
Genesis chapter 5, the generation of Adam. You see all the sons of Adam chronologically identified. When was that? Was it before the flood? So when did he set the bounds for the people according to the number of the children of Israel? You mean to tell me, am I reading this text correctly, Fred? Are you telling me, or am I reading, that at the time that God prepared the generation of Adam, he also prepared the inheritance of Israel? He already knew they were Israel back then. Let's read verse 7. It says, remember the days of old, concerning the years of many generations. Ask thy father, and he will show thee. Ask thy elders, and they will tell thee, that when the Most High divided the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. What does this mean to you? If what I'm reading is misunderstood, then somebody please clarify it for me. When were the children of Israel in the mind of God? When he prepared their inheritance. When? From the very beginning. So Israel existed before we first see it in Genesis 32. And these little tidbits of text that bring a lot, reveal a lot. This is why we have to search. This is why we have to look. And we have to compare text to find out, okay, am I misreading this? I looked it up in the Hebrew, and it actually said in the Hebrew, when the Most High, when El Elyon is the word there, when El Elyon parted the nations by their inheritance, he prepared Adam. And it actually says, through the children of Israel. I just shook when I heard that. I read that. Prepared Adam through the children of Israel. And you know what that brings to mind? The last Adam. How is he prepared? Through Israel.
Perfect sense.
Makes perfect sense. So I said, wait a minute, I need to read this again. This isn't the first time I read it. I've known about this for a long time. I was taught this. But it never became an issue because in our understanding, we always understood that Israel in the earth will always perish. History says, the scriptures show you that they keep perishing as they keep what? Getting out of covenant. But there will be one final Israel who will inherit the kingdom. And they will be prepared. So we'll see the Israel in the earth keep putting on surnames. They take on the name. They take on titles and they name themselves by those names. But the Israel of God doesn't change. It's the character and the individual that is the Israel of God that identifies it. And it makes sense, because if it's from Adam, then Adam understood there could be no guile. And in the Israel of God, there is no guile. So, he couldn't allow himself to be deceived either. Deceive himself. So here we have. So, if we are understanding this correctly, when Deuteronomy chapter 32 says that when the Most High divided the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. Anybody understand something else about this? Now you know Revelation and the 144,000. Who are they? Children of Israel. And there's a number. And there's a great multitude that will come out with them. So it's all prepared. We need to be wise in these things. How are they? Well, how is it that the 144,000 that are standing on the mount with the Lamb have the Father's name written in their foreheads? See, so when Jacob is blessing Joseph and his children, he's blessing them and he's applying the name that had been given to him and his fathers had also. From where did the fathers get the name? From their fathers. Who were their ancestors? We did the chronology. We found out that the father of Noah and the father of Abraham all had the same lineage. They come from the same lineage, all of them. So Israel is prepared even back then. So, when the scripture says that when he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel, what is that really actually telling us? When the blessing to Abraham says, I will multiply you like the stars of what? Of heaven. I'll also multiply you like the sands of the sea. But I'll multiply you like the stars of heaven. Well, how long have the stars of heaven reigned over the earth? Generations. So he will multiply him throughout the generations of the heavens and the earth, and he'll multiply him throughout the end generations. Forever. He'll keep multiplying until the time comes for the last Adam, who has been preparing his last generation, which is the generation of Christ. And it can't be prepared in any other way, brethren. Can't be prepared in any other way than through the Israel of God. It has to be. Now, in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 9, it continues to say, for the Lord's portion is his people. It says, and Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. How are the Lord's people identified? In the book of Exodus chapter 19, go there for a second. Book of Exodus 19, verses 5 and 6. It says, now, therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people. For all the earth is mine. And ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak to the children of Israel. Now, if we obey the voice of the Lord and keep his covenant, then ye are his peculiar treasure. And we are his peculiar treasure above all people. And the Lord will make you a kingdom of priests and a nation that is holy. In Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 4 and 5, it says, Moses commanded a law, which is the inheritance of the congregation of Jacob. And he was king in Jeshurun, when the heads of all the people and the tribes of Israel were gathered together. If you read Deuteronomy 33, verse 5 to 26, you will see that that is when Moses is relating to all the tribes that law that has been handed down to them. And in doing so, let's read that for a second. In verse 26, let me get to Deuteronomy. In verse 26, it mentions Jeshurun. He begins with, in verse 4, Moses commanded us a law, even the inheritance of the congregation of Jacob. And he was king in Jeshurun, when the heads of all the people and the tribes of Israel were gathered together. And then he begins to say in verse 6, let Reuben, the first tribe. And then this is the blessing of Judah in verse 7. And in verse 8 it says, speaks of Levi. It says, and he defines how Levi will be a judge in judgment according to the Thummim and the Urim. And then he goes on to spell it out. In verse 10 says, they shall teach Jacob thy judgments and Israel thy law. They shall put incense before thee and hold burnt offerings upon the altar. Who's he speaking of here? Levi. And in verse 26 he says, there is none like unto the God of Jeshurun, who rideth upon the heaven in thy health and in thy excellency of the sky. Verse 27 says, the eternal God is thy refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. He shall thrust out the enemy before thee, and shall say, destroy them. Israel then shall dwell in safety alone. The fountain of Jacob shall be upon the land of corn and wine. Also his heavens shall drop down the dew. Happy art thou, O Israel, who is like unto thee, O people saved by the Lord, the shield of thy help, and who is the sword of thy excellency. And thy enemies shall be found liars unto thee, and thou shalt tread upon their high places. So, do we know who was king in Jeshurun when this was done? It was Moses. Moses was king in Jeshurun. Who is Jeshurun then? It's telling you, the 12 tribes. The tribes here. That's Jeshurun. In what form? In what form are they?
The upright.
The upright. There's a purpose for that. Remember, Joseph saw in a dream. They were in the field, and they were binding sheaves. And the sheaf of Joseph stood upright. And they all paid obedience to him. Deuteronomy is telling us about when they came out. And they came out after that dream was fulfilled out of Egypt. Because as we studied earlier in previous studies, when they entered Egypt, Israel bowed down to Joseph. He redeemed them. He was there for a reason. He was prepared ahead of time. So there is a purpose for this. There's a purpose for how the chronology comes. Jeshurun existed, again, way before, through its meaning, the upright ones. And the upright ones existed before the flood. So who gives birth to whom? Well, Jeshurun gives birth to Israel in this generation, in this birth generation. And Israel is needed so the last Adam prepared to receive his generation of people. But nothing changes. It's still the same instruction of God. Nothing changes. It's still God giving them an instruction, teaching them, giving them a law, giving them a testimony. And they all are modeled in the same way. So why are we concerned with who the Israel on the earth is? It's better to know why Israel is than to know who Israel is. Why is Israel necessary on the earth? That's important. If you know why, then you'll be able to understand who it is. Because it's fulfilling the purpose of why they were brought here, why they exist. Isaiah 44. In the book of Isaiah chapter 44. It's interesting. And it says, "Yet now hear, O Jacob my servant, and Israel whom I have chosen. Thus saith the Lord that made thee." And notice what it says, "and formed thee from the womb, which will help thee. Fear not, O Jacob, my servant, and thou, Jeshurun, whom I have chosen." It says, "For I will pour water upon him that is thirsty, and the floods upon the dry ground. I will pour my spirit upon thy seed, and my blessing upon thy offspring. And they shall spring up as among the grass, as willows by the watercourses. One shall say, I am the Lord's. And another shall call himself by the name of Jacob. And another shall subscribe with his hand unto the Lord, and surname himself by the name of Israel. Thus saith the Lord, the King of Israel, and his Redeemer, the Lord of hosts." Notice this phrase, the King of Israel and his Redeemer. Thus saith the Lord, it says, the King of Israel and his Redeemer, the Lord of hosts. I am what? The first. And I am the last. And beside me there is no God. Who is this? Christ. So, Jacob is the servant. Yes or no? And who is the chosen? Israel. For what purpose? That the Redeemer may come through his chosen. The Redeemer will come through his chosen. Doesn't matter how many will try to call themselves, I am the Lord's. Many will say, I am of Jacob, I am Jewish. Others will subscribe with their hand that they are the Lord's, meaning by their testimonies, they write. And some will even surname themselves with Israel. Doesn't matter. God has chosen his servant. He's identified him to us. And he's also chosen whom he will use to bring the Redeemer. We need to understand these as they apply to us today. So, you want to hear a prophet? Go somewhere else. I'm not a prophet. You want to hear the prophet? Here it is. You have been given the tools, the wisdom, the understanding to recognize the Israel of God on the earth. And if you cannot, then you must dedicate to scriptures to identify. You're not going to find him in websites that say Israel this. You're not going to find him in, you're going to find him here. That's the only place you're going to find the true Israel of God. Okay? So, let's end this lesson and then we'll continue with a little break and then we'll have some questions. We'll have some questions.